Welcome to the Maquipucuna Reserve, a sanctuary of biodiversity, a haven for conservation, and a living testament to what passion and vision can achieve. This is where nature thrives and stories of hope begin. Maquipucuna is not just a place, it's a legacy, a promise made decades ago by two young visionaries, Rebeca Justicia and Rodrigo Ontaneda. They dreamed of protecting this extraordinary land, and through their pioneering work, they established Ecuador's first conservation nonprofit, setting the stage for a movement that continues to inspire the world. Today, we're joined by Isabel Ontaneda, daughter of Maquipucuna's founders, who has carried their vision forward with incredible dedication and passion. Isabel has played a pivotal role in amplifying the foundation's work, from expanding conservation efforts to protecting the habitat of the Andean bear.
I'd like to tell you a little bit about what Maquipucuna is and why we exist and what we do. So in addition to being an eco-lodge, as you can see, and a cloud forest reserve, we're actually a nonprofit that my parents started 36 years ago. They had explored this region when they were in their early 20s, had fallen in love with the nature here, they're nature lovers, and had also sadly seen a lot of deforestation in the mid-80s. And they decided to set out as a family to protect 100 hectares. And that became their life goal. And they thought if every family protected their 100 hectares, then there wouldn't be so much deforestation. And then they talked about this so much that, long story short, the reserve has now grown to be 6,000 hectares. They created the foundation. They were able to gather the donations to receive, the funding needed to purchase this land. But from the beginning, they realized how important it would be to not just purchase land for conservation and leave it at that, but do a kind of holistic approach to conservation. And in doing that, they actually purchased key areas in this region, and we're still within the Metropolitan District of Quito, so it's kind of amazing. But now all these 6,000 hectares are within this larger corridor of conservation. So I was explaining that Maquipucuna is now 6,000 hectares, but when we started Maquipucuna, my parents decided to use ecotourism as a tool for conservation, because I mentioned that we did a holistic approach to conservation. They actually reached out to our neighbors in the southeast, a community called Yunguya, and to the east, a co-op called Santa Lucia that already existed in co-op for like 40 years now, so it had already existed maybe 10 years when we started. And the Maquipucuna Foundation was really the first organization to jumpstart their ecotourism projects in addition to our own. And the idea was involving people in the equation of conservation was really important. So not just focusing on nature, but also the human aspect. And what's really amazing is now we have neighbors in conservation, and that's kind of what's been the success story for this whole region, and that's also related to the bears. But when we started our eco-lodge, I'm going to show you just a quick photograph of what our first eco-lodge looked like, and I can send you this as well. And as you can see, our first lodge was already surrounded by pastures, because basically this whole area all the way to the mountain up that way and all around is now a secondary forest, but it had already been cut down. And this is relevant to the bear story. So when we started out, maybe 20% of the 6,000 hectares had already been deforested, and 20% now is a secondary forest, but 80% was primary forest. But in order to jumpstart that process of regeneration, which is primarily how we've allowed the forest to get back to its original state, we did a little bit of reforestation. And we did so right here in this area where we have our trail system. And we chose 12 native species of trees. My mother, being the ecologist she is, made sure they were pioneering species, and species that really were replicating what was already in nature. And amongst these 12 species was the miniature avocado tree, the pacha tree, which produces this fruit. And it's the one that's in the mural over there, that the mama bear is climbing up. And so what's important about this tree is that it's fast growing, it's a pioneer species, and about 10 years after we planted them, the fruit started to mature, and this started to attract an abundance of bears. So before this reforestation project, when we first started, there was knowledge that there were bears in this region. This was common knowledge, but they were so rare that even our guides, who are now guides but had previously been hunters, so they were out in the forest often, hadn't seen any bears in the wild themselves until they became guides and were guiding during our bear seasons. So what really happened was this food source, which is really high in fatty acids, and has a really strong smell, which the bears can smell, and they migrate kind of from all over to this spot where the trail system is to eat the fruit. Basically, the bears are congregated. So instead of being 1 per 1,000 hectares, which is their normal habitat, we've seen more than 65 bears recorded in this 250 hectare area. And that's significant because this concentration of bears is really what allows us to see them and to create this ecotourism experience, which is the Andean Bear Safari. And so, like I mentioned, when we started, there were bears, but they weren't abundant. Now, it's been 18 years where annually we see a congregation of Andean bears. Occasionally, like potentially this year, 2 seasons in 1 year, but usually it's 1 season. And it's variable. It's variable in and of itself. These pakcha trees can produce flower pretty much any time of the year, and therefore fruit any time of the year, but it tends to coincide with the dry season. And with climate change, that dry season is more unpredictable. So we've had bear seasons that started as early as July, late July this year, and it lasted about 2 months. And then we've had bear seasons that last up to 4 months. And last year we had a bear season that started early August and ended near the end of December. So it's, again, quite variable. What's really exciting, if you see these little fruits and they're mature, is that it seems like with the whole weather patterns this year, we just experienced one of the worst droughts. We are actually seeing more pakchas now than we did at the very end of the season in September. So it's attracting bears. And about 2 days ago, we actually had a bear sighting. It was a very unusual bear sighting. We have this building that is still under construction, which we're hoping to finish soon, but it's going to be an interpretation center to focus on bears, but also the other wildlife. And one of our trail maintenance staff saw a bear exploring inside and actually jumping off the 2nd floor veranda into the woods. So I tried to get a little plaster footprint of it, but the other footprint that my parents saw this morning was only a kilometer up the mountain. So not that close, but not that far. So it means the bears seem to be back, or at least one bear, and they have a reason. They're food. But what's really, really amazing is, well, the bears are obviously special and they're an important part of our conservation story. They're keystone species, but mostly they're umbrella species. So we protect Andean bear habitat, we protect the habitat of thousands of other species, like you can see in the mural over here. Maquipucuna has registered over 4,500 different species between plants, animals, fungi, etc. And that includes nearly 2,000 species of plants, 400 of which are orchids, over 130 species of reptiles and amphibians, 400 species of butterflies, over 420 species of birds, aside from bears, 81 species of mammals. So it's a really, really biodiverse place. And that's because within Maquipucuna, which is in this larger corridor, this was actually an initiative of the Maquipucuna Foundation from the beginning to create this connected area. There's a lot of private reserves within here, including obviously Maquipucuna, which is the largest. But this is all connected to this Reserva de Biosfera del Chocó-Andean, the Andean Chocó Biosphere Reserve. It's the 7th Ecuadorian Biosphere Reserve. And it was pretty much one of the achievements that the Maquipucuna Foundation from the beginning, set out to achieve. Because 30 years after our onset, UNESCO finally declared this area a biosphere reserve. And this is again important because this Chocó-Andino is within a larger bioregion known as the Tropical Andes. And the Tropical Andes is in one of the top 5 biodiversity hotspots of the world. So all of this, Maquipucuna still within the Metropolitan District of Quito, makes it kind of an amazing conservation success story, because it really required the forward thinking and the vision of my parents of protecting an area that wasn't valued for its conservation importance so close to an urban city. And so that's the story of Maquipucuna.
The Maquipucuna Reserve is more than a sanctuary. It's a living legacy of passion, resilience, and hope. Thanks to the Ontaneda family and their unwavering commitment, this forest remains a thriving beacon of biodiversity and community-driven conservation. We hope you've enjoyed this incredible journey into Maquipucuna and the inspiring story of its founders. This is just the beginning of our adventure through Ecuador's cloud forests. Be sure to join us in our next episode of Echoes of the Wild, where we'll explore the secrets of the Andean bear, its behavior, its habitat, and its critical role in this ecosystem. If you love what you've seen and want to support conservation efforts like these, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Echoes of the Wild. Together, we can amplify the voices of nature and inspire action for a better tomorrow.